The wrench slipped from Jack's grease-stained hands, clattering against the concrete floor of the garage he'd called home for 30 years. Outside, the city's demolition notice flapped against the chain-link fence like a surrender flag. 1 week, it read. 1 week until the place where he'd fixed cars, raised a family, and buried his wife would be reduced to rubble, all in the name of progress. He wiped his forehead with the back of his hand, leaving a smudge of oil, and stared at the empty bays where laughter and engine revs once filled the air. Now only silence. Then, the bell above the door jingled. A gust of wind carried in the scent of rain as young Tommy Alvarez shuffled inside, his school backpack slung over one shoulder. "Mr. Jack, Mom said to give you this." The boy held out an envelope stuffed with cash, $87 in crumpled bills and coins. Jack's throat tightened. Maria Alvarez, a single mom who worked 2 jobs, had insisted on paying for last month's break job, even when he'd told her to forget it. "She's been saving since you fixed the Camry," Tommy mumbled, kicking at a loose bolt on the floor. Jack pressed the money back into the boy's palm. "You tell your mama dinner on me next time." The radio crackled with static, the local news reporter droning on about the city's revitalization project, luxury condos where his garage stood. Mayor Linda Carter's voice oozed through the speakers. "Growth requires sacrifice." Jack's jaw clenched. Sacrifice. He'd sacrificed enough. His knees ached from decades of bending over engines. His savings had evaporated after Diane's cancer treatments. And now this. He yanked the plug on the radio. Outside, the first drops of rain hit the pavement as Mrs. Kowalski, his oldest customer, pulled up in her dented '98 Buick. She hobbled out, thrusting a casserole dish into his arms. "You think I'd let you starve while those bureaucrats try to erase history?" Her voice trembled, but her grip was iron. The dish was still warm. Pot roast. Diane's recipe. Jack's vision blurred. He was halfway through thanking her when headlights sliced through the gloom, a sleek black sedan with tinted windows rolling to a stop at the pumps. The engine purred like a contented cat, foreign and out of place in his dying world. The driver's door opened, and a polished leather shoe touched the ground. Then, a voice from the past. "Jack Reynolds, you look like hell." The rain came down harder. The scent of motor oil and fresh coffee clung to the garage walls one final morning as Jack flicked on the neon open sign out of habit. It buzzed weakly, one letter flickering like a fading heartbeat. He ran a calloused hand over the dented cash register, the same one Diane had balanced their books on every Sunday, humming off-key to old rock songs. A pile of cardboard boxes by the door yawned empty, waiting to swallow 30 years of memories. Across the street, the bulldozers had already arrived, their yellow frames hulking and impatient. Jack turned away, focusing instead on the photo taped to the fridge, a younger version of himself grinning beside a cherry-red Mustang, Diane leaning against the fender with her sun-freckled smile. "Shoulda retired when you told me to, die," he muttered. The coffee in his mug had gone cold. The bell jingled again, and in shuffled old man Peterson, his cane tapping a slow rhythm on the concrete. "Heard you're closing today," he grunted, tossing a set of keys onto the counter. "Ain't no one else I trust with Bessie." Jack stared at the keys to Peterson's '76 Ford pickup, the same truck he'd tuned up every spring for 20 years. The old man's eyes were wet. "City don't know what they're tearing down." By noon, the garage was crowded with familiar faces. Maria Alvarez brought tamales wrapped in foil, her son Tommy pressing close to Jack's side. The Henderson twins, now in their 30s, showed up with the BMX bikes Jack had welded back together when they were kids. Even stoic Mrs. Kowalski returned, slamming a binder of petitions onto the counter. 200 signatures, she announced. "Linda Carter can't ignore all of us." Jack was halfway through explaining zoning laws when the door burst open. Mayor Linda herself stood in the doorway, her sharp suit and sharper heels at odds with the grease-stained floor. "Jack," she said, voice clipped, "I thought you'd be packed by now." The room went silent. Tommy's grip tightened on Jack's sleeve. Linda sighed, adjusting her glasses. "Look, this isn't personal. The new development will bring jobs, revenue." "Revenue for who?" Maria cut in, stepping forward. "The folks getting priced out of their homes." A muscle twitched in Linda's jaw. She pulled an envelope from her briefcase, final notice, stamped in red. "The council's decision stands. You have until 5 p.m. to vacate." The paper crinkled as Jack took it, the sound absurdly loud in the quiet garage. As Linda turned to leave, her heel caught on an oil slick. She stumbled, her designer purse spilling contents across the floor, lipstick, keys, a silver flask clattering to Jack's feet. He picked it up, the engraved initials catching the light, Dr. Diane Reynolds. His breath hitched. Linda snatched it back, color rising in her cheeks. That's. Where'd you get this? Jack's voice was dangerously quiet. Outside, thunder rumbled. The first drops of rain hit the pavement as Linda straightened her jacket, avoiding his eyes. It was a gift, she muttered, but the lie hung heavy between them. The flask had been in Diane's casket. The bell jingled one last time as Linda fled into the storm. Jack stared at the door, the flask's phantom weight still burning in his palm. Behind him, Mrs. Kowalski's voice was barely audible over the rising rain. Now that's a story I'd like to hear. The rain fell in sheets as Jack stood in the garage doorway, the mayor's taillights dissolving into the gray haze. Diane's flask. How the hell had Linda gotten it? His fingers twitched at his side, still feeling the ghost of those engraved initials against his skin. The storm drowned out Mrs. Kowalski's questions, the old woman's lips moving soundlessly as she tugged at his sleeve. Then headlights. A sleek black town car glided through the downpour like a shark through dark water, its wipers fighting a losing battle against the deluge. It rolled to a stop directly in front of the garage, the engine cutting out with a purr that made Jack's rusted tow truck look even sadder by comparison. The driver's door opened, and an umbrella snapped to life before the figure behind the wheel even stepped out. Polished Oxfords hit the wet pavement. The umbrella tilted back just enough to reveal a sharp jawline, salt and pepper stubble, and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Jesus, Reynolds, place looks worse than I remember. The voice punched through 20 years of memory in an instant. Marcus Wright, the cocky kid who'd rolled into his shop in '99 with a busted transmission and empty pockets. Jack had fixed the car, taken payment in six-packs of cheap beer and bad jokes, and sent him on his way. Last he'd heard, the kid had moved west and struck it rich. Marcus shook the rain from his coat as he stepped inside, his gaze sweeping over the crowded garage, Maria clutching Tommy's shoulder, the Henderson twins frozen mid-bite into their tamales, old man Peterson's cane hovering like he might use it as a weapon. The billionaire's smile widened. Did I interrupt a wake? Jack found his voice. Funny, we're mourning the death of common decency. He nodded at the demolition notice still taped to the counter. Marcus plucked it off, scanning the text with raised eyebrows. Ah, Linda Carter's handiwork. He said the mayor's name like it left a bad taste in his mouth. Mrs. Kowalski stepped forward, her floral perfume cutting through the smell of wet leather and motor oil. You know the mayor. Marcus folded the notice into a perfect square. We've done business. His eyes flicked to Jack. You still make that god-awful coffee. 10 minutes later, they sat in the back office, the same cramped space where Jack had once patched up Marcus's bleeding knuckles after a bar fight. The billionaire sipped the bitter brew without flinching. Tastes like nostalgia, he deadpanned. Jack leaned against Diane's old desk. Cut the crap, right? Why are you here? Marcus set down the mug with deliberate care. Because Linda Carter is about to learn what happens when you kick a hornet's nest. He pulled out his phone, tapped twice, and slid it across the desk. The screen showed a news headline. Tech Moguls Foundation buys downtown block, mystery plans for community revitalization. Jack squinted at the tiny map beneath the text. The highlighted property lines matched the rezoning plans exactly. His stomach dropped. You own the land. Not yet. Marcus's grin turned razor-sharp. But I will by 9 a.m. tomorrow, and I need a head mechanic for the new community auto shop I'm building. The office door creaked open. Tommy stood there, a grease smudge on his cheek and wide eyes fixed on Marcus. Mister, there's like a bunch of fancy cars pulling up outside. Jack pushed past him into the garage bay. Through the rain-streaked windows, he counted 12 luxury vehicles, Porsches, Mercedes, a vintage Corvette idling at the pumps. As he watched, a woman in a tailored suit stepped out of a silver BMW and waved at Marcus through the glass. Marcus appeared at his shoulder, voice low. Recognize her? That's Amanda Chen, CEO of Vertex Motors. Drove here straight from her private jet when I told her Jack Reynolds was getting screwed over. He clapped Jack on the back. Turns out you've got friends in high places, old man, and we're just getting started. Outside, car doors slammed in unison as the convoy of millionaires braved the storm, all marching toward one doomed garage. The garage doors rattled as another gust of wind sent rain skittering across the pavement. Jack watched through the streaked glass as Amanda Chen shook water from her designer coat and strode inside like she owned the place. Which, if Marcus had his way, she soon might. The other arrivals clustered behind her, a parade of polished shoes and sharp haircuts that made Jack's regulars shrink back toward the tool racks. Amanda zeroed in on Marcus. "You weren't kidding about the ambience," she said, eyeing the peeling paint and flickering fluorescence. Then she turned to Jack, extending a hand. "Mr. Reynolds, Marcus told me you rebuilt a '67 Shelby GT 500 with nothing but a socket set and a prayer back in '02. Her grip was firm, her nails unchipped. I'd kill to see that kind of work today." Jack blinked. Car's long gone. Sold it to pay, he caught himself before saying Diane's medical bills. Marcus cleared his throat. "Amanda's Vertex Motors sponsors classic car restorations nationwide. She's offering full funding to reopen this shop under their Heritage program." He nudged a duffel bag onto the counter. The zipper yawned open, revealing stacks of $100 bills. Seed money, no strings. The room erupted. Maria gasped. Old man Peterson's cane clattered to the floor. Tommy lunged forward, eyes wide as dinner plates, before his mother yanked him back by his collar. Jack didn't move. "Why?" The word came out rougher than he intended. Amanda and Marcus exchanged a look. Then from the crowd of suits, a barrel-chested man in a cowboy hat stepped forward. "Because some of us remember what it's like to need a break," he drawled. Recognition hit Jack like a kick to the ribs. Billy Rourke, the rodeo star whose truck he'd fixed after a drunk driver totaled it in 8. Billy jerked a thumb at the others. "That one's a senator's kid you kept out of jail when his Maserati had stolen plates. Blonde over there. Her daddy owns the NASCAR circuit. You patched up her first go-kart." One by one, they stepped forward. A tech billionaire whose Tesla battery Jack had resurrected. A chef whose food truck he'd kept running through 3 winters. Even a pop star whose tour bus had broken down outside town a decade ago. All strangers to each other, bound only by the stubborn mechanic who'd helped them when no one else would. Mrs. Kowalski elbowed Jack hard enough to bruise. "Told you this town wouldn't let you go without a fight." Marcus pulled out his phone, angling the screen so Jack could see the live news feed. A reporter stood in front of City Hall, shouting over the downpour. Unconfirmed reports that billionaire investor Marcus Wright has purchased the disputed property. Mayor Carter's office has yet to comment. The garage door screeched open again. All heads turned as Linda Carter stumbled in, her perfectly coiffed hair now plastered to her skull by rain. She froze at the sight of the duffel bag, the assembled moguls, Marcus's smirk. "What the hell is this?" Amanda smiled sweetly. "A hostile takeover, Madam Mayor." She tapped her phone, and a projector hummed to life, casting blueprints against the grease-stained wall. "Meet Second Chance Auto, Heritage Garage by day, vocational school by night. Fully funded, tax-exempt, and," she added, nodding to the senator's son, "strangely immune to rezoning laws thanks to our new historic preservation status." Linda's face went sheet white. "You can't just—" "Actually," Marcus said, plucking the demolition notice from her trembling fingers, "we can." He tore it neatly in half. "City Council's emergency session starts in 20 minutes. I'd hurry if I were you." As Linda fled, Jack finally reached for the duffel bag. The weight of it, the sheer impossibility, made his hands shake. He looked at Marcus. "Still don't get why you're doing this." For the first time, the billionaire's smirk faltered. He reached into his coat and pulled out a faded Polaroid. Jack and a teenage Marcus leaning against a freshly painted Camaro, Diane grinning behind the lens. "Because you gave a broke kid a shot when no one else would," he said quietly. Then, louder to the room, "Now let's go save this damn garage." The cheer shook the rafters. Outside, the rain finally stopped. Dawn painted the sky in streaks of orange and pink as Jack rolled up the garage door for what was supposed to be his final morning. Instead of silence, he was met with a sea of people flooding the street. Townspeople holding handmade signs, news vans with satellite dishes, and at the center of it all, Marcus's convoy of luxury cars now plastered with bumper stickers reading, "Save Second Chance Auto." Someone had tied balloons to the tow truck. Mrs. Kowalski materialized at his elbow, thrusting a megaphone into his hands. "They've been arriving since 4 a.m., she said, grinning at the crowd. Jack recognized faces from 3 generations, kids he'd taught to change oil, grandparents whose cars he'd kept running through blizzards, even the high school shop class lined up in matching t-shirts. Maria Alvarez stood on the bed of a pickup truck, passing out coffee while her son Tommy waved a sign twice his size. HEROES fix more than cars. Across the street, the bulldozers sat silent, their operators leaning against the yellow metal, watching the spectacle. One gave Jack a thumbs up. The roar of motorcycles split the air. A dozen veterans on Harleys rumbled down the street, flags whipping behind them. At the lead was Billy Rourke, his cowboy hat swapped for a helmet painted like the American flag. He killed the engine and tossed Jack a leather jacket. "Suit up, boss. We're riding to City Hall." Jack stared at the jacket, the same shade of blue as Diane's eyes. His throat tightened. "I don't do speeches." Marcus appeared beside him, adjusting a tie that cost more than Jack's monthly rent. "Good thing you've got a billionaire hype man." He plucked the megaphone from Jack's limp fingers and climbed onto the hood of Amanda's BMW. "Listen up. In 30 minutes, the city council votes on whether to bulldoze history or honor it." The crowd whooped. Camera flashes popped. "But here's the thing. They think we're just a bunch of nobodies with wrenches and signs." He paused, grinning. "Turns out, nobodies move mountains." A horn blared. 2 black SUVs rolled through the parting crowd, followed by a news truck with National emblazoned on the side. The passenger window lowered, revealing a silver-haired reporter Jack recognized from the evening news. "Mr. Reynolds, CNN's picking this up coast to coast. Care to comment on the viral hashtag?" He held up a phone showing David V's Goliath mechanic trending nationwide. Jack's knees nearly gave out. The march to City Hall felt like a dream. Jack rode shotgun in Billy's sidecar, the wind whipping through hair that hadn't felt sunlight in years. Behind them, the town marched, kids on bikes, elders in wheelchairs pushed by teens, even the stoic barber from Main Street waving a sign that read, "Cut the red tape, not OUR history." News helicopters circled overhead. City Hall's steps were a zoo. Reporters shouted questions. Council members peeked through blinds. And there at the top of the stairs stood Linda Carter, her usual poise cracking under the chaos. She gripped the railing, her knuckles white. "This is a zoning matter, not a circus." Amanda stepped forward, her voice carrying without a mic. "Actually, Madam Mayor, it's a people matter." She nodded to the senator's son, who produced a thick binder. 5,000 signatures, affidavits from 7 urban planners proving this revitalization benefits only developers. And she paused dramatically. A little clause in the city charter about historic landmarks. Linda snatched the binder, flipping pages with jerky movements. Her face drained of color when she reached the last document, a notarized deed transferring the garage property to the newly formed Reynolds Diane Memorial Foundation, signed by Marcus and backdated by 48 hours. Jack turned to Marcus, "Diane's name." The billionaire shrugged, uncharacteristically shy. "Seemed right." A commotion erupted at the edge of the crowd. Tommy came barreling through, waving a tablet. "Mr. Jack, look!" The screen showed a live feed of the state governor at a press conference. "And given the overwhelming public interest, I'm declaring this property a protected community landmark effective immediately." The crowd exploded. Mrs. Kowalski burst into tears. Maria hugged Tommy so tight he yelped. Linda's voice cut through the noise, shrill with desperation. "You can't just—" "Oh, but we can," Marcus said, producing a folded letter with a gold seal. "Governor's orders, and guess what? The Foundation's first project starts today." He gestured to Amanda, who unveiled a rendering on her tablet, Jack's garage, transformed but familiar with a new sign. "Second Chance Auto, where the past builds futures." As the crowd cheered, Jack finally let himself believe it. Somewhere, Diane was laughing. The ribbon stretched taut across the garage entrance, its red fabric bright against the freshly painted blue walls. Jack stared at the scissors in his hand, real silver, not the plastic ones they'd used for Tommy's school project last year. The crowd spilled into the street, buzzing with laughter and the smell of the food trucks Marcus had insisted on hiring. Someone had tied balloons to the refurbished tow truck, their strings fluttering in the breeze like Diane's wind chimes used to on summer afternoons. "Speech," shouted Mrs. Kowalski, elbowing her way to the front. The megaphone had been replaced with a proper microphone system, but Jack still felt the words stick in his throat as he faced the sea of faces, his regulars, Marcus's billionaire brigade, even a few city council members who'd suddenly remembered they were always on his side. He cleared his throat. The mic screeched. "30 years ago," he began, "I opened this shop with 2 lifts, a loan, and a wife who believed in me more than I believed in myself." A murmur ran through the crowd. Jack's fingers brushed the small photo tucked in his breast pocket, Diane leaning against the garage's original sign, her overalls streaked with the same blue paint they'd used for the reopening. "Never figured the best thing I built wouldn't be engines, but this." He gestured at the people, the street, the life humming around him. Marcus stepped forward, uncharacteristically solemn in a suit instead of his usual leather jacket. "Then let's keep building." With a flourish, He unveiled the new sign above the bay doors, Second Chance Auto in bold letters, and beneath it, Vocational Training Center. The crowd erupted as Amanda wheeled out a cart covered with a tarp. When she yanked it away, 10 shiny toolkits gleamed in the sunlight, each engraved with a student's name. Tommy was first, nearly tripping over his own feet in his rush to claim the set marked T. Alvarez, future master mechanic. His small hands trembled as he opened the case, revealing wrenches with his initials laser-etched into the handles. Maria pressed a hand to her mouth, tears cutting tracks through her makeup. The rhythm of the day settled into something warm and familiar. Burgers sizzling on the grill, old men arguing over engine specs, kids clambering into the driver's seats of Marcus's luxury cars under careful supervision. Jack moved through it all like a man in a dream, shaking hands, accepting hugs, until he found himself leaning against the original workbench, now restored and mounted as a museum piece, near the entrance. A shadow fell across the wood. Linda Carter stood there, her designer dress out of place among the grease stains. She didn't meet his eyes. "The flask," she said abruptly. "Diane gave it to me, the week before her voice cracked. I was her hospice nurse, nights when you were at the shop trying to scrape together payments." The world tilted. Jack's grip on the workbench turned white-knuckled. All the pieces clicked, Linda's avoidance of the garage, her flinch whenever Diane's name came up, the way she'd stormed out of every city council meeting where he'd testified. "She made me promise not to tell you," Linda whispered. "Said you'd blame yourself for not being there more." A single tear splashed onto the polished wood. "But when the rezoning came up, I thought if I erased this place, maybe I'd stop seeing her everywhere." The noise of the party faded. Somewhere beyond the ache in his chest, Jack realized he stopped breathing. He reached into his pocket and pulled out Diane's old keychain, the one she jokingly called his soul because he'd panic if it left his sight for 5 minutes. The metal was warm from his body heat as he pressed it into Linda's palm. "She'd want you to have this," he said hoarsely. "And thanks for being with her when I couldn't." Linda's shoulders shook. For a heartbeat they stood there, two broken people in a garage full of life, until Tommy's voice cut through the moment. "Mr. Jack, the race is starting." Out back, Marcus had set up a makeshift track with orange cones, where kids were revving pedal cars modified by the new vocational students. Jack wiped his eyes as Tommy climbed into a pint-sized Ferrari, the boys' laughter ringing as clear as the bell above the shop door. That evening, as the last guests trickled out and the sunset painted the pavement gold, Jack lingered by the new memorial plaque near the entrance. "For Diane, who taught us that every engine, like every person, deserves a second chance." Marcus appeared beside him, holding 2 beers. "To new beginnings," he said, clinking his bottle against Jack. Somewhere down the street, a car backfired, then roared to life. Jack smiled. The neon, open sign buzzed softly against the twilight, its glow reflecting in the puddles left by the afternoon rain. Inside the garage, the scent of fresh paint and grilled burgers still lingered, mixing with the sharper tang of new tools and polished metal. Jack stood in the doorway, watching as Marcus helped Tommy pack up his engraved wrench set, the boy chattering excitedly about rebuilding his bike engine over the weekend. Mrs. Kowalski's voice carried from the parking lot where she held court with the remaining guests, her laughter sharp and bright. "I told you this old place had fight left in it," she crowed, waving her cane at the newly painted mural on the side of the building, a sprawling, vibrant scene of Diane's favorite quote in looping script. "Kindness is the oil that takes the friction out of life." Jack's fingers brushed the small Polaroid still tucked in his pocket, the one Marcus had given him. Diane's smile, frozen in time, seemed to whisper across the years. He could almost hear her voice, warm and teasing. "Took you long enough to let people help you, tough guy." A hand clapped him on the shoulder. Marcus stood there, his expensive suit jacket slung over one arm, tie loosened. "You good?" Jack nodded, swallowing past the lump in his throat. "Better than good." Marcus grinned. "Then let's make it official." He pulled out his phone, tapping the screen before handing it to Jack. A YouTube video was already queued up, the footage of today's celebration, the marching crowd, the governor's announcement. The thumbnail showed Jack mid-speech, Tommy beaming at his side, the garage's new sign gleaming in the background. The title read, "How a Small-Town Mechanic and 12 Billionaires Saved a Community." "Views climbing by the minute," Marcus said. "Turns out people still love an underdog." Jack huffed a laugh. "You planning to monetize my life story next?" "Only if you say yes to the documentary crew arriving Monday." Marcus winked at Jack's horrified expression. "Kidding, mostly." As the last of the cars pulled away, Jack lingered in the quiet garage, running a hand along the original workbench, now preserved under glass, its decades of nicks and oil stains untouched. Tomorrow, the first vocational students would arrive. Next week, Amanda's team would install the new lifts. And somewhere out there, Linda Carter was holding Diane's keychain, finally making peace with ghosts of her own. The camera would fade out here, on Jack flipping off the lights. The neon signs glow the last thing visible as the door swung shut. But before it does, words would appear on the darkened screen. Want more stories where kindness wins? Hit subscribe, ring the bell, and remember, your second chance might be just around the corner.